Hi everybody, it's Monday morning. Hope you're in for a fantastic day. Hope you had a great weekend of worship and time with your family and friends. We're into the book of Numbers. We're looking at different tests that Moses and the children of Israel had to pass in their journey to the promised land. Sadly, they failed more tests than they passed, and we get to probably one of the most greatly disappointing tests of failure that they could ever have had. Numbers chapter 14, we spoke about it on Friday, where the people were told by God to go across into the promised land. They refused. 10 spies gave a terrible report. 2 of them gave a good one. And God was very unhappy. And he saw this as a great slap in the face, a great act of deliberate disobedience and rebellion. Sadly, the pattern continued to develop, and in fact even got worse, because it went from bad to worse, because the people, when God judged them after their rebellion, and many of the people actually suddenly had a bit of a pang of guilty conscience. They saw that God had judged the 10 who had gone into the land, and they had died of a disease, and the people began to kind of fear, to think, well, maybe we're next. So they went to Moses and they said, so Moses, okay, we didn't go. God has taken those 10. We kind of get the hint. I think maybe we should go. And Moses said to them, no, you must not go. God has not told you to go. God is angry, but he has restored, and he has forgiven. But don't go. Don't go. Wait for God's instruction. But then in verse 17, it says there, verse 44, it says, nevertheless, they acted in their presumption, and they went up to the hill high country without Moses and the Ark of the Covenant. It intrigues me, this word they use of presumption. People never presume on the grace of God. And even though these people had been through the pattern of this rebellious spirit, they rebelled, Moses intervened, he prayed for the people, God forgave, and God restored them, he forgave them. But never act presumptuously on the grace of God. As amazing as the grace of God is, it should never be acted upon presumptuously. It should never be taken for granted, and it certainly should never ever be abused. Some people will think, well, if God's going to forgive me, then why don't I just keep on sinning, and I can just do the sin and then ask God to forgive, and his grace is so big and so amazing, he'll forgive me. I don't want to take anything away from the magnitude of the grace and the amazingness of God's grace, but never act in presumption or take for granted the grace of God. Paul confronts this issue in his writings, and he said exactly this. He says, if the grace of God is so great, why don't I sin more so that grace can abound more? And if I sin more and God forgives me more, man, I'm just using the wonder of who God is. And he came and he said, never, never, never will I ever use God's grace to my end to facilitate my sin and take for granted the grace of God that will lead me to a place of restoration, revitalization, and a place of forgiveness. So guys, there are habits in our lives that sometimes get to us. There are thinking patterns that we think, well, this is not cool, but God forgave me last time for it, and that was awesome. Maybe God will just continue just to keep forgiving me. Kind of like the pattern here. The people sinned, Moses intervened, Moses prayed, and God forgave. And it was like this cycle of rebelliousness, forgiveness, and it was a silly, silly cycle. And God wants for us never to use his grace unworthily. It's too precious to be used like that. So let's resolve today, as we contemplate our own lives, to resolve never to abuse the grace of God, as wonderful and as incredibly amazing as it may be. Think about that today. Go and have a phenomenal day, people. Let's go save the world. Bye.